Welcome to the DNVR Broncos podcast on this wonderful Wednesday. I'm your host, Zach Stevens, joined by my friend, Justin Michael. Justin, I had too much of Buffs with me over just yesterday, so I needed to kick him off and bring you on. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for asking. I'm excited to be back and always, here to rep CSU because RK certainly. Oh yeah, and Hank now, I guess. So it's just buffs all the time on that pod, huh?
It's Buffs all the time. I need the CSU Rams on this pod representing, so I'm pumped to have you on, Justin. And last time we did a show together just about 2 weeks ago, I had an absolute blast, so I'm pumped to be joined by you again. And Justin, Von Miller, boy, he just won't go away. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but of course, we've had Von around town for over a decade. He's traded. Then even after he wins a Super Bowl with the Rams, there was a lot of off-season chatter from Von himself going on Instagram and teasing Broncos fans, saying how much he wants to be back with the Broncos. And then so we talked about it all off-season. And then he goes and signs a massive mega deal with the Buffalo Bills, a 6-year, $120 million deal. And I think everyone in Denver's happy for him, a little nervous about what he brings to Buffalo. But then, Justin, just a couple of days ago, we hear from Von again, and he just continues to play to Broncos fans, despite being with an AFC opponent, despite being with a team that could play the Broncos in the playoffs this year. He just is a Denver Bronco for life, and he's not afraid to say it.
It's cool. I mean, it's when you're a fan, this is the type of relationship with the city and organization that you kind of romanticize and hope that the players have. And it's not always the case. I think we kind of learned that quickly. I will say it seems like the Broncos in general, better than most teams, have a strong fraternity of, former players that are prominent members in the organization, or they're just around a lot, people like Rod Smith that are just always kind of there. And it's cool to see that these legends get treated right and, that they want to be around. I think that speaks a lot to the organization, but it is weird, with him playing for Buffalo. And obviously the last couple of years, Denver hasn't exactly been on the same playing field as Buffalo. They've been a contender. Denver just not, we'll just say it that way. But I don't know. It's odd. As somebody that loves Von Miller, always wanted to see him retire as a Bronco. It warms my heart as somebody that follows this process. It's definitely weird.
I think you put it all perfectly, just about how cool it is that not just John Elway that the Broncos have around the organization, but other guys that are showing up. Peyton Manning, he has zero connection with the Broncos right now in terms of like an actual connection, but he's always around the building. And guys like Rod Smith, Mike Shanahan continuing to show up. So you're 100% right. And then this is what every Broncos fan wants, is just Von Miller continuing to gush about how he loves the team. And we're going to pull up a video clip in a second. But one of the questions that was asked to Von when he was speaking at Von's Vision earlier this week was something along the lines of, you are now in a good place in Buffalo, but do you ever think what it would be like if you were in Denver? And he says, God works in strange ways. Who knows what the future holds? And so he's still just kind of dangling that out there, that not just he's going to retire a Bronco, but maybe there's another chapter where Von is a Bronco. And boy, I mean, like you said, Justin, that's what everyone wants to hear, because everyone loves Von Miller. And I don't think anyone blames George Paton for trading him for a second and a third round pick last year. We'll talk about this in the second segment. Maybe some people blame him for not signing him this offseason, which is interesting. But with Von leaving, I don't think people were upset at that. So the fact that Von wants to return and just wants to be a Bronco is something that everyone wants to hear.
It's so cool. I mean, I love it. I do think that there's a part of Von Miller, and I'm not saying that he's not being genuine here, because, we criticize athletes for not giving honest answers. A lot of athletes could have tap danced around it and just been like, hey, I love Denver, but I'm with Buffalo now, and that's all I'm thinking about. Von, in typical Vaughn fashion, kept Broncos fans, we're he still texts us you up every now and then, just making sure that we're still interested. And we are. We always will be. But I don't know, man. It's so weird to see how this has played out. And I wonder how much of it has to do with one, Vaughn just wanting Denver to continue loving him, but two, also just understanding the impact of your legacy. And I think it matters to Vaughn that he's kind of viewed as the best defensive player in Broncos history, or at least one of, if you don't view him as number one. He's now gone on and won a Super Bowl with the Rams, could win a third Super Bowl with another team. I think that's all exciting to him, but I think it genuinely matters to him, like how Broncos fans view him and have him in this elite status with only a couple of other individuals.
Yeah, 100%. It's a great point, and it's Vaughn's brand, and especially, we know Vaughn is about his brand, and there's nothing wrong with that. Russell Wilson is the biggest guy about his brand, and that's totally okay. But Vaughn is doing a great job preserving his brand in Denver, because just about a year ago, with the legal issues that were going on, and he wasn't willing to take a pay cut, he had a really dicey radio interview, which made him look bad. In my perspective, and a lot of people's perspective, it wasn't the best. And now I think people have completely forgot about all that other stuff and are just looking at Vaughn as who they really wanted him to be. And the fact that he does this and is still tickling Broncos fans, I think is really smart for brand purpose. And actually, let's get to the clip of him talking about all of this, if we can pull that up, Kale. And this was courtesy of our friend Brandon Cristal. He was at Vaughn's Vision event that Vaughn had in Denver earlier this week. Let's play a little clip of it.
You can do with Randy Gregory this year on the edge.
Oh, that'd be great, man. I've been a huge fan of Randy Gregory for a long time. Like I said, I know this team like the back of my hand. Russell Wilson and Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton and Albert O. And then we got Billy Turner and Gary Bowles. We got Javon Williams in the backfield. It's gonna be crazy, man. We got Patrick Surtain. Everybody knows I love Patrick Surtain, and he's going into year 2, and year 3 would be crazy for him. It's like I said, man. You just really can't erase the brotherhood that we've created here, and I'll still be a fan of the Denver Broncos. The Bills don't win it, I want the Broncos to win it, and it'll always be like that.
You've got Josh Allen, the Super Bowl contender up there, but is it a little bittersweet to now have Russ here in town after you were looking for that?
I'm a huge fan of Russell Wilson. This is when he was still with the Seahawks, and we had no idea he would be a Denver Broncos. So huge fan of Russell Wilson. We both worked with Trevor Mowat together. He had a huge relationship with Trevor Mowat before he passed. And like I said, I'm a huge fan of Russell Wilson, and this team is gonna be great. It's bittersweet that I won't be here to be a part of it, but I still got orange and blue in my heart, and that'll stay there forever.
Okay, we'll pause it right there, Kale. And oh my goodness, I mean, come on. I don't think I could have even teed it up more than that. I mean, he's talking about the Broncos as we in that interview. He's talking about orange and blue in his heart. He's going through the Broncos, saying he knows them like the back of his hand. And that first answer that he gave, Justin, we always know that Vaughn is going to talk every team that he's on up so much. He's going to talk up Joe Flacco. He's going to talk up Drew Lock. He's going to talk up Case Keenum. We know that about Vaughn. But the different thing here is he's never been like this about other teams in his decade with the Broncos. It's not like you're like, hey, what do you think about the Bills when he's with the Broncos? Or what do you think about another AFC team? And he's never talking them up to that extent and saying that he knows them like the back of his hand and how these guys are going to be so good. Von Miller is a Buffalo Bill right now. I just have to remind myself that after hearing those answers.
Yeah, the we is definitely, I mean, it's natural. I'm sure there were some Bills fans that heard that interview and, probably didn't love it. And honestly, I can't say I blame them if there was, a Bronco, if Randy Gregory was still referencing the Dallas Cowboys as we, I think Broncos fans who can, no offense, I am one of you, can be a tad bit sensitive at times.
You
probably wouldn't take it very well. No, I mean, it comes out of passion, though. I'm not saying it in a negative sense. I think as much as Broncos fans love Von Miller for their commitment, they take it personally when people don't want to be here, or it seems that way. And Vaughn, obviously, it seems like he wants to be here, doing a great job with his brand, like everything we said. But I don't know. It would make me feel a little bit odd as a coaching staff and organization if I'm the Bills. I'm not gonna lie. Like, again, I love that he was honest about it all, but from their side of things, it's probably a little bit like, huh, all right, we just gave you a 6-year, $120 million deal. Like, the Broncos got Gregory for 5 years, 70. So, in comparison, like, they really paid him.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean the Broncos or the Bills are saying, we just gave you $51 million of guaranteed money. Why are you doing this? And the great thing about Vaughn is, like we've talked about, whatever team he's on, he's going to hype them up. He could be who's the worst team in the league? He could be on the New York Jets, and man, you would think Zach Wilson is the bee's knees. You would think they're going to win the Super Bowl the way he would talk about him. But this is a different team that he is not on right now. And so that's just what's so incredible about this. And in that interview further on, he said, I'm always open to the Denver Broncos, which just makes me think, Justin, it makes me think, could there be another chapter here? Probably not. After signing a 6-year, $120 million deal with the Buffalo Bills, especially at 33 years old. He's got 3 years pretty much fully guaranteed on that deal. So he's going to be at 36 years old by the time the Bills would be able to truly move on from him. And it doesn't make sense for the Bills to trade him to the Broncos. What are the Broncos going to do? Give up a future first-round pick, a second and a third in order to get him? No, probably not, with being 6 deep at outside linebacker right now and having their future at outside linebacker, especially with Nick Bonito, and you have Randy Gregory for at least 2 years of guaranteed money, and who knows what the future holds for Bradley Chubb. So the future for the Broncos in Von Miller is probably something that's not going to happen. But man, this really makes me think, should George Paton have gone after Von Miller in this past free agency? Because clearly Von would have been open to it.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think that we have to trust George Paton and his decision making based on his track record, although it's not, his tenure here is not super long. At this point, what we have seen, I think he deserves the benefit of the doubt. He signed Randy Gregory, a very talented edge rusher, to, comparatively a pretty team-friendly contract. I'm not upset that the Broncos didn't sign Von Miller. I am a little bit, I guess, surprised that they didn't, reportedly even reach out or try to sign him. That said, I mean, there's a couple of ways to look at that. George Paton could just have already determined, do you want to know what? I think the best of Von Miller, we've already seen it. And, he went on and played pretty well for LA. So, Paton could be kind of wrong in that aspect. We shall see. There's also an element of, maybe Paton knew what Von's market was and didn't want to disrespect him by lowballing him. So he didn't make him an offer because he's like, look, I can't even come close to what you're going to want. I've already tried to negotiate with you in the past before we moved on from you. I don't know. I'm not upset, I guess, is where I come from it, especially given that they signed Randy Gregory for a pretty nice deal in comparison.
Well, and let's dive into those deals, because I want to play devil's advocate, or maybe it's just because I believe the other side, and we're going to get into that. But first, I got to tell you about our friends over at DraftKings Sportsbook, where if you sign up right now and use the promo code DNVR, you get a risk-free bet up to $1,000, meaning if you place a bet, it doesn't hit, you get another chance to cash in. And that is one of the great perks of DraftKings Sportsbook. Right before the show started, I got a notification on my phone that DraftKings was giving me a 50% profit boost for any MLB bet. That's what they do every single day over at DraftKings Sportsbook. They're giving you so many fun boosts to get in the game. And man, football season. Justin, we're 2 weeks away from training camp right now. When football
Can't
season
wait.
gets cranked up, oh my gosh, DraftKings is going to be the absolute place to be. And speaking of Von Miller over at DraftKings Sportsbook, he has the 8th best odds to be the defensive player of the year. Yes, that's higher than any current Bronco, which may just play into my argument a little bit. But if you want to get in on that, Von Miller at plus 2,800, you can do that over at DraftKings Sportsbook. And of course, you must be 21 or older, Colorado only, new customers only, restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Minimum $5 deposit, eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details.
Love it. Zach, this rugby club composed of crossover athletes ended their first season at 5-5. If you haven't heard, they call it the American Raptors. They are Rugby Town USA's newest rugby team. And what they do is they get athletes from all different backgrounds, whether that's track and field, football, basketball, baseball, wrestling, whatever. They coach them up. They give them all the skills necessary to participate in rugby. They go on and compete. What's really cool, you can go to the games for free. It's over at Infinity Park. I've actually gone a couple of times. If you don't know much about rugby, a great way to get involved is with the DNVR Rugby podcast. It's weekly. My guy Colton hosts it. It's awesome. He goes through like the ins and outs of rugby. There's some 101 episodes to really, coach up the newbies. But he also has great interviews. He's been in the league, been around the game now for years. It's awesome. He does a great job. Go check it out and go check out the American Raptors. They are awesome.
They are awesome. And speaking of awesome, you got to check out us over at thednvr.com. We've got everything Denver sports, Colorado sports covered. Justin's got us covered on the Rams up in Fort Collins. We've got Buffs covered. We've got the American Raptors covered. And of course, we've got the Avs, Nuggets, Rockies, Broncos. We've got it all, including Rapids over at thednvr.com. Of course, you're listening to us either on YouTube or one of the places you find all your podcasts, and we really appreciate all of that. And if you're tuning in on YouTube right now, hit us with a thumbs up. We'd really appreciate it. Subscribe, turn on alerts so you know when we're going live, especially with training camp coming up. You're not going to want to miss one of our post-practice pods. And also go to thednvr.com. When you become a member with an annual membership, you get a free t-shirt of your choice. So check us out. We got so much good stuff coming down the pipe, and we'd really appreciate it. All right, Justin, back to this conversation, because the question is, should the Broncos have pursued Von Miller likely instead of Randy Gregory? You bring up some good points, and let me just play devil's advocate here and point something out. I was in favor the past couple of years of the Broncos trading Von Miller, because Von Miller is someone you want when you are Super Bowl or bust, when you are pursuing a Super Bowl. He's just not that great of an asset. Now, he's a really good asset, but and the reason I argued the Broncos trading him the past couple of years is because, Justin, we were not looking at Case Keenum, Joe Flacco, Drew Lock, Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch, any of these guys, and saying the Broncos are legitimate Super Bowl contenders. And just the value that the Broncos could have got for Von Miller in order to rebuild, something that John Elway didn't want to do, in order to rebuild. They could have got so much for him, especially many years ago. Could have got a first-round pick, maybe could have got multiple first-round picks for him if they moved on from him from right after the Super Bowl, but the Broncos didn't. And then last year, it made sense to trade him because they were not winning the Super Bowl at all last year. However, Von Miller, just look at last year. He goes to the Los Angeles Rams, who are a Super Bowl or bust team, and not only wins a Super Bowl with them, but was a crucial part of winning the Super Bowl with them. Not only did he have a great run down the stretch for them in November and December, but then in the playoffs, he absolutely turned it on, with having 2 sacks in the Super Bowl and had, I believe, like 4 or 5 combined sacks in the playoffs. That is who Von Miller is, and that is what he brings to a team. And so to me, I say, okay, Von Miller was not good for this team last year. This year now, George Paton, and you're going for it all this year, next year, the following year. Yeah, Von Miller's a guy now you want.
It's tough to argue with. he got such a massive deal. You would have to assume that, he took at least somewhat of a hometown discount in this scenario. It's possible. I mean, at the moment, you have Russell Wilson on a relatively team-friendly contract at $19 million. I mean, for a quarterback of his status, that's not bad. I mean, a cap hit of $24 million, but base salary of 19. I think you probably would have had to move on from Bradley Chubb. You probably try and trade him at that point, just because you are, they re-signed the wide receivers. If you gave Vaughn 6 years, $120 million, it limits the flexibility that you have for the rest of the roster pretty significantly. If everyone plays to their potential, though, yeah, you might be onto something as far as the Broncos being a Super Bowl contender. Obviously, you're hoping that Randy Gregory, maybe not, Vaughn in the playoffs, but is, a double-digit sack guy and hopefully makes an impact in the playoffs.
Yeah, you're right on, Justin, and you're also right on that the Broncos wouldn't have got Von Miller for 5 years, $70 million with only the first 2 years guaranteed, like they got Randy Gregory. They would have to pay up, and one of the only downsides of Von and Denver, he was not taking a discount at all. We know, Cropgate after the 2015 Super Bowl, where Von and John Elway had a very contentious contract negotiation. And then Von became the highest defensive played player, not in NFL history, not just for a little bit, for 2 full years. He maintained that title, showing just how big of a contract he got. And last year, he was asked to take a pay cut, and he said no. He called George Paton's bluff, said, "No, I know you're not going to cut me." George Paton did not cut him. Von Miller did not have to take a discount at all. And then there was an interesting report last week that came out of Dallas that said the Cowboys, Von Miller's hometown team, offered him the exact same deal that they offered Randy Gregory, 5 years, $70 million. And Von Miller said that was way too much of a pay cut for him to have to take in order to go home. And we know Von Miller would have liked to go home and play for the Cowboys at some point in his career, just like he would have liked to come back and play for the Broncos this year. So I think Von probably would have had the same approach if George Paton said, "How about 5 years, $70 million? We'll give this to you instead of Randy Gregory." I think he would have said, "You want me to leave $50 million on the table? You're out of your mind." And I don't blame Von Miller for that. I don't. I'm not going to say that a guy should pass up on $50 million. However, I think the Broncos, the way Von Miller has talked this offseason about the Broncos, and just it doesn't seem like he's fully bought into the Bills yet. I think you probably could have got him on a little bit of a discount. And instead of what he's averaging $20 million per year with Buffalo, I think he probably could have got him for $18 million. Again, I just don't want to say that Von Miller would take a big discount. So I think, to me, the question is, would you rather have Randy Gregory at 5 years, $70 million with only 2 years being guaranteed? Would you rather have Von Miller, let's say 5 years, $18 million per year? So there's a $6 million difference per year on these two guys. And you probably would have had to guarantee Von's entire first 3 years, not just 2 like Gregory.
Are you asking Justin, the Denver Broncos season ticket holder, or asking Justin, the potential NFL executive? Because those are two different answers.
Well, let's hear them both, Justin, because I think I know which one is which here.
All right, if I'm running a team, it's Randy Gregory. Obviously, you're worried about, things going south. He's had some off the field issues, but, Von had some stuff off the field early on in his career. I don't think, anybody thinks about any of that stuff, nowadays. Justin, the guy that grew up loving this team and watched Von Miller lead them to Super Bowl 50 and firmly believed, that Von would retire a Bronco, and feels weird every time I see him, in another team's helmet. I just want him to retire a Bronco. I think he probably will anyways when he signs one of those ceremonial deals where guys, go back to their original team so that they can technically retire. But just the fact that we're going to see Von play potentially, you know, really impactful, successful years of his career go on to set some sack records with another team as a, you know, a guy that bleeds orange and blue, I don't feel so great about that.
It's very fair. And Justin, Jose brings up a good point in the comment section. He says that difference, that $6 million difference, is a slot cornerback of difference. And to play into your point, Justin, the executive, I actually think it's more than that. And let's just look at the Broncos themselves. The difference in that $6 million is a Kareem Jackson and a K'Wan Williams. So those are both two starting players on your defensive side. K'Wan Williams, a very good slot corner who's going to have an impact on this team. And then Kareem Jackson, he's your starting safety next to Justin Simmons. And I think the way Kareem has played these past couple of years, borderline Pro Bowl type of safety. So that's what you're missing out on if you go with Von Miller instead. So when I pose it to Justin, the executive, would you rather have K'Wan Williams, Kareem Jackson, and Randy Gregory, or would you rather have Von Miller?
Yeah, I mean, I already would have already had just Gregory than Von, but the fact that you add, you know, a competent slot corner in Williams who gives you more depth, because we'll kind of have to see what happens with that position with some of the younger guys. I think you're hopeful, but I mean, just you get a proven guy, and then Kareem, who's been awesome and has kind of negotiated very differently than Von. Like, he's now taken a couple of discounts to stick around. Little bit of a different scenario when you factor in positional value. Kareem's older, all of that stuff. But yeah, I mean, the fact that the Broncos were able to take the money that they would have needed to, you know, bring back Von and bring back 3 starters. I mean, the math's easy in that scenario. You want to win. You want to win with the players that you love, but even as a fan, even as somebody that doesn't want Von to play for somebody else, you've got to recognize that at some point you can't keep everyone, right? Like the Avalanche are experiencing it right now. They're coming off of this phenomenal season. They won the Stanley Cup. You know, now we're going to go see Darcy, you know, finish his career probably on the East Coast. Nazem Kadri's probably not going to be back, which that one kills me. But I get it. You got to sign Nathan McKinnon eventually. The Broncos are going to have to lock down Russell Wilson to an extension eventually. You gotta play the numbers to an extent.
And that's something the people in the comment section are saying is, could you afford Von Miller and Russell Wilson at the same time? And the answer is absolutely. The Broncos still have $12 million in cap space now. They could do that, but then the back end of your roster or the back end of your starters does take hits, like we just talked about. Someone points out DJ Jones may not be on the table. I think you probably either get DJ Jones with Von Miller, or you don't have or you get DJ Jones and Randy Gregory, or you don't have guys like K'Wan Williams, Kareem Jackson. And so that's where getting the stars and getting so many stars on your team and paying them a lot of money really hurts you, is then you're going to have a lot of question marks. One of the things that we talk about this team heading into training camp, Justin, is there's maybe 1 or 2 spots of the starting 22 that you have questions about. Defensive line, your third defensive line spot, maybe 1 spot on your offensive line. Outside of that, you feel great about every other position in terms of the starters. Maybe not the depth, but the starters. You add Von Miller to this, okay, then maybe you're having a question about slot corner. Maybe you're having a question about safety, and maybe you're having another question about defensive line. However, saying all of that, well, Justin, to your point, I think George Paton would have absolutely chosen the route that he did and is very satisfied with building a team, not just a superstar team. However, I would have gone the opposite way, and I would have signed Von Miller to this deal. Not just to please the fans, of course, but Von Miller is a guy that you want on your team when it is third down in the playoffs. And he proved that again last year. And now winning 2 Super Bowls, being absolutely dominant in those playoff runs, he proves it, that he is a guy that you need regardless of anything else when the playoffs come and when football is being played in the playoffs, because he performs, and he's proved it now multiple times. And with George Paton putting such an emphasis on outside linebacker and pass rush, that's why I'm not surprised. I guess I'm a little surprised that he didn't even reach out to Von. And that is something that happened. The Broncos did not offer Von Miller a contract this offseason because they wanted to go a different route. And I agree with George when the Broncos aren't Super Bowl contenders that you don't really need Von because it's just going to be a waste of 18, 20, $22 million per year. But if you are a Super Bowl contender, he's the guy that you need.
Are we 100% sure that George Paton views this year? I think it's a matter of how you view Denver's competitive window, right? If you want to win a Super Bowl this year, I think your argument is valid. I mean, you'd be banking on everybody playing to their potential, staying healthy, the offensive line, being better than it's been, the running backs, all that stuff. But if you think Russell Wilson has a decade, like, a Tom Brady like career, and you think that this window's really only just getting started, if you do sign Von, it greatly handicaps your roster building capabilities down the line. If you really think that you're a team that can be competitive for a long time, and I know people don't love thinking this way because I think a lot of Nuggets fans have viewed it through this lens for a while, and then eventually you're just like, all right, well, when is the year that we are going to be competitive going to come around? I just want to throw out that with how long that quarterbacks play, with the young talent that you have defensively, you have your receivers locked down, you've got your franchise running back. This team could be pretty good for quite some time. And with how good the AFC West is going to be, you've got a first-year coach. I think that it's probably kind of realistic to think that Peyton, a guy who has pretty good job security, views their window to be, longer than just the next year or two.
It's a really good point. And when we talk about Von Miller's window, we're talking about probably those 3 years of guaranteed money because he's already 33 and a half. He'll be 36, nearly 37 by the time those 3 years run up. That is probably done in terms of like a big time pass rusher that's going to have an impact. Randy Gregory, on the other hand, 29 years old, Justin. So he's got 4 years on Von Miller. And I think that's a really good point, is that if George Paton is viewing this in terms of the next contract for these guys, okay, then of course it's Randy Gregory. If George Paton's viewing this as the back end of these contracts for these guys, well, it's probably Randy Gregory, even though there's a lot more of a gamble with Randy Gregory than Von Miller. 4 to 5 years from now, if that's when George Paton truly views this window for this team, which makes sense. Russell Wilson will be 38. We've seen a lot of quarterbacks in their late 30s recently, including Peyton Manning, win a Super Bowl. If that's kind of how he's viewing it, okay, then Randy Gregory makes a ton of sense. And I think it's a really excellent point. And if he thinks, however, this window is the next 1 to 3 years, I would have gone with Von Miller. But you look around the AFC West, you look around the AFC right now, and it looks pretty tough to win a Super Bowl in these next 1 to 3 years. And Justin, something that I believe is the Broncos are not in a Super Bowl or bust window this year. I think that starts next year. So me personally, I do believe that the Broncos are in a Super Bowl window in these next 3 years when Von Miller is going to be the better option than Randy Gregory. And that's why I would have gone that route. But Justin, if that's what George Paton thought of, maybe it's the next 4 or 5 years, then you're spot on. And I think Randy Gregory is probably worth that risk, especially because if you get to those 4 or 5 years and Randy Gregory has been injured and he's not playing and he still hasn't produced a double-digit sack season, you move on from him and it costs you $0 for doing that. And then you can go spend that money, that $20 million that you were going to spend on Von. You can spend it on someone who's younger and who's a better fit right now.
I do want to clarify. I'm not even necessarily saying that Peyton doesn't think that the Broncos can be, competitive or, contend for a Super Bowl in the next couple of years. I just think it's a matter of when you feel like this window is going to close definitively. And if you kind of view it as these next couple of years, it's Super Bowl or bust. And I do think it's probably fair to say after next year that, moving forward for the fans, at least, I mean, it's been a long 5-6 years. So they're going to have high expectations and the organization's going to have to match them. I just think that when you look at this team and you look at the young talent that you have on both sides of the football, and you look at how competitive the rest of the AFC is, and you understand that there's going to be growing pains, you got to give it some time. And, I think they will. I don't think there's going to be any panic when you see the hires that they've made. It seems like they're in a pretty stable spot. But I think GMs just like to have flexibility, and when you sign a guy like Von Miller to a 6-year deal, 120 million, and you're committing to a guy who would, be in his late 30s as an edge rusher and is primarily dependent on being agile and quick, which he still has. But when it goes, it tends to go quick. And I think if you're a GM, you're just banking on, well, I would love to have Von Miller and I would love to have this, guaranteed stud these next couple of years. I can build a pretty stacked defense with a lot of young players and just keep some options open if we need to, sign some different guys down the line.
And speaking of keeping options open, that's exactly what he's done at outside linebacker, because we don't know the future of Randy Gregory if he's on this team in 3 years. We don't know if Bradley Chubb is going to be on this team next year, but they have so many guys that could become big-time options. Baron Browning, he showed a lot of flash and a lot of potential as an outside linebacker this offseason. Nick Bonito, their first pick in this year's draft, is a super talented pass rusher. He still needs to work on other parts of his game, but in terms of pass rusher, he's extremely talented. And then you also have guys, Malik Reed. He's been the Broncos sack leader in the past couple of years. You have Jonathan Cooper as well. So the Broncos have tons of options at outside linebacker, and those options is something that George Paton wants on the entire roster instead of just stacking one position. So, Justin, I think you make a really good and a fair point. I think we'll just agree to disagree on this, but that's good. I mean, because in the end, I don't think it's the biggest deal, but I do think it's really interesting just the way Von Miller has talked about the Broncos. So I love that we are able to talk about this. And something I got to tell you guys about is our friends over at the Colorado Golf Association. They're having an awesome raffle going on for all our golf fans out there. It's their Dream Golf Vacation Raffle. Prizes include stay and play packages at Wailea Beach Golf Course in Maui, Whistling Straits, a Naples Golf Tour, and the Palm Beach Golf Tour, as well as a $5,000 gift card to Bandon Dunes. Anyone who enters before July 14th, that's tomorrow, will be eligible to win the early bird prize of a VIP experience at the 2022 BMW Championships, where the winner will get an inside the ropes experience and walk with the players in the event. Such a cool thing. And all the proceeds go to two really cool organizations. So if you want to get in, head to coloradogolf.org to get your tickets today. That's coloradogolf.org.
Man, somebody's going to get to live the high life. You might not be able to win that luxurious prize package, but you can live your best life too when you're drinking an ice cold Breck brew. Breckenridge Brewery, you all know it. If you follow DNVR, we're like this. We go together like peanut butter and jelly. They are the official beer of the DNVR bar. When we open back up, it's going to be flowing. I can't wait. But until then, satisfy your thirst all summer with their just amazing options. I'm a sour guy, so I love Mountain Beach, but they've got hard seltzers. They've got shandies now. Watch your back line in Kugel. They've got hard sodas. I mean, you name it, they've got it. Check out the Breck Beer Locator to find the closest location near you, whether it's a liquor store, grocery store. They're everywhere. I mean, they're advertised prominently in every Denver stadium. Their logo, it's cool. I got a ton of Breck clothes. You can't tell I drink the Breck Kool-Aid. I'm all in. And by Kool-Aid, I mean summer pills shandy, which is absolutely delicious. So go check it out. And I'm going to stop rambling. And I hope it gets to 5 p.m. pretty soon, because I could use an ice cold Breckenridge brew right about now.
Oh man, I can too. We just got to kick our weekend off on Wednesday at noon right now, Justin.
It's a state of mind, baby.
Exactly. But before we do, let's talk to the people and jump into the comment section. First one coming in from Big Hank Stan says, underwear football versus gelato. Yeah, pistachio and lemon. What's your favorite gelato flavors, Justin and Zach? Well, I'm gonna go with I had last week, I had a melon gelato, and I would have never ordered that in my life, but my fiance got it, and it was probably the best flavor I had. I'm a coffee, stracciatella sort of guy, but She went with the fruit, and it was so good. What are you going with, Justin?
I do love a good coffee ice cream, but if we're talking sorbets specifically, fruit's where it's at, man. I grew up going downtown. I'm not sure if it's still there. I should check. There used to be this awesome sorbet spot off of Colfax. It's really close to like Colfax and Lafayette, if I remember correctly. Anyways, I like a good lemon sorbet, nice and tart, nice and sweet. I'm big on raspberry as well, but honestly, I'm a sweets guy. You can't go wrong. You put a sorbet, you put ice cream in front of me, it's going down.
Man, me too. That's why cotton candy ice cream, bubblegum ice cream, give it to me. I love it because that's about as sweet as it gets. He says he goes on and says, "Is free safety the least important regular position in the game after nose tackle?" Love, Big Hank Stan.
Oh, that's a good question. I would say free safety might be more important than tight end, depending on how they're used in your offense.
Okay.
Also, I guess I would say if we really want to get technical, like a fullback, because you probably don't even have one. But
right.
I don't know. I believe firmly in positional value. I understand why we reference it. I would also argue that when you have a really poor anything, it really doesn't matter. It's going to stand out, whether it's long snapper, who you get a couple of bad snaps, the Broncos Super Bowl. We all remember how that can go.
Oh man.
You know what
Yes,
I mean?
unfortunately we do.
I understand the question, and I think it's a fair comment, but I'm big on having a solid free safety that can come up and make an impact in the run game. One like Denver has in Kareem Jackson. Obviously, you don't want to overpay for him, but he's solid.
So the positions that I think when I think of least important, I do think of safety. I do think of nose tackle. I think of offensive guard. Tight end could be in there. That's probably the second tier for me. And then I think you also throw inside linebacker in there. And it just, man, it depends on what your team is, because I hate to undervalue any position on the offensive line, especially, I mean, if you have a good quarterback, you want to protect him. If you have a bad quarterback, well, you really need to protect them because they can't look bad. And so I'll put guard a little ahead of safety here. I will put nose tackle as the least valuable position because especially now in today's game, they just don't see the field as much as you would need a position to in order for them to be able. And then so I kind of have it up against inside linebacker and free safety. And man, the way I think of this is if I could have one elite player at one of those positions, which one would I want? I think I go inside linebacker. So I'll say that free safety, yeah, it is the second least important position on the field.
You've convinced me. I don't think it's a tough sell for a lot of other positions. Nose tackle is easy because even in a scenario where you need one, there are other people on the field that can step up and kind of offset, what you're lacking there. One thing with guys in the secondary is, I mean, they're your last line of defense. So, if he's poor and he's out of position and it comes down to him,
And that's one of the great things about Justin Simmons and him being reliable and trustworthy.
That's the thing,
is that
when you have him, he's so solid.
Yep. And you just don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about your last line of defense not being there because he is going to be there. But I really like the question. Next one from Coach Tobin says, "What's up, guys? RK, I've got your back on the hotel auctions. I've seen 2 here in Texas near San Antonio. I scored a Patrick Waugh signed and framed picture of one for $33. There was also an auction in my gym lobby randomly." So before we get to his question, Justin, have you seen a hotel lobby auction before?
No, but I mean, based on context, I think I can kind of put together what you guys are talking about. Just like a raffle, I assume, of various prizes. Is it you walk up and you like write the little offer and you bid on it?
I think so. I don't know. I've never seen one. RK says it's a thing, and I guess Coach Tobin is coming to his
RK
defense
lives
as well.
a much more luxurious life than I do. He's always going on cool vacations and stuff. So I'm not surprised that RK knows how the high life lives.
Right, exactly. So Coach Tobin goes on and says, shot out of a cannon, sign one for their career, cut one, and trade one. So sign one, cut one, and trade one. And here are the options: Justin Simmons, Pat Surtain, and Caden Stearns. What are you
Well, I'm
doing,
going to cut
Justin?
Stearns.
Okay, yep, easy. I agree. So now you
I mean,
get to
I
sign
like
one
Caden
and
Stearns
trade
even,
one.
but I guess I'm gonna sign Sertan because Roll Tide, and also because I think he's
Roll
gonna
Tide.
probably be one of the top, 1 or 2 cornerbacks in the NFL for quite some time. It's tough though because I think that there's an argument that Justin Simmons might be the best safety in the NFL right now. But I mean, if I could get a haul for him, his value's never been higher, and I have the best corner in the league in that scenario.
Yeah, here I can't really think of trading Justin, but I absolutely cannot imagine Pat Surtain not on this team. So it's easy for me. I'm signing Pat Surtain for his career. And Justin, the reason you're trading him instead of Caden Stearns is you can get so much more value for Justin Simmons than Caden Stearns. We talked about this yesterday on the show. There's not that much value. And we actually talked about just this last question. There's not that much value in a safety, but Justin Simmons is so good. So if you're ever going to get value from a safety, you're going to be able to get it from Justin. So that's what I'm doing there. Next one
I
from
think
Big
it's
Hank
odd
Stan.
that while we
Sorry, Justin.
just real quick, sorry. I think it's odd that while we simultaneously view safeties as an unvaluable position, we're asking them to do more on the field than ever before. Just something to consider.
I mean, it's a great point, and especially when it comes to the inside linebacker debate, why safety is probably could be more valuable than inside linebacker, is just because inside linebacker is seeing the field less and less in the modern day NFL, while safety is literally Justin Simmons is never leaving the field ever.
You've got to do it all, right? You've got to be able to move down into the slot. You got to be able to go deep. You've got to be able to, make an impact in the run and help out when the linebackers aren't doing their job. It's the more I think about it, I want to push back on safety being an invaluable position. I don't agree with it. I know that it's common, like football mindset, and I get it. And when it comes to paying them, you better have a really good one, a really versatile one. You don't want like a box safety like Jonathan Abrams. You're not going to give him the money that you would give Justin Simmons because he can't do a eighth of what Simmons can do. But when you have one that's really rangy, really versatile, it can really change a defense. All right,
Yeah,
let's go to the
and
next question because I keep going back, but I like
it. and Big Hank Stan again chimes in and says, "Dear Hank, it appears that in my rather brief absence, you found someone or you know what? We're gonna save this one, Big Hank Stan, because I need you to save it when Hank's on. So just put this back in because it's a beauty, but I want to make sure Hank's here for that. Next one from Monster Mayhem says, got a question for you fellas. What do you believe is the greatest position group in Broncos history? So many great choices to choose from. Ooh, this is a great question. And to me, my heart just goes to the easy one, the big one. You got John Elway, you got Peyton Manning, and I think what puts us over the edge is you have Russell Wilson. You have 3 first ballot Hall of Famers, 3 guys that could potentially, by the end of Russell Wilson's career, have an argument to be in the top 10 ever. That's where I'm going here. And it's the easy one, but man, it is so unique and so cool just how stacked the Broncos are at quarterback in their history now.
I mean, if Russell lives up to what we think he's going to be, it's pretty dang impressive. The fact that Denver's been able to do this. Also a great example that Denver historically just never drafted quarterbacks well. So whenever it's done with Russell Wilson, let's just trade for another one. Let's not do this song and dance for 5-6 years. Let's just we are who we are. We go out, we see big armed, we find winners, and we trade for them, and that's okay.
So
outside
Justin,
of quarterback.
Oh yeah, go give me an outside of quarterback.
I mean, receiver, maybe. You've had a lot of really talented ones over the years. Corner, obviously, Champ Bailey. I think it might be linebacker though. When you look at,
Mm.
you know, uh, Tom Jackson, Gradishar, Al Wilson, Von
Yeah.
Miller, lot of guys that should be in the Hall of Fame. Not all of them necessarily are, and some more in Von Miller that will be in the future.
Yeah, I think it's spot on. I think that's a really good point. Some huge names, especially you mentioned my guy Al Wilson. So I love it. Denver Rivals says, "Hey guys, just like Zach taking some time off, I have two returned. Despite the Avs game taking away from our attendees and participants from the Denver Rivals flag football fundraising game, we raised over $30,000 for the Alzheimer's Association. We are in the early
Nice.
planning process for next year's game, and we would love to have the DNVR fam join us. Yeah, absolutely. Congratulations, DNVR Rivals. That is awesome. That's a ton of money. He says, my question today is, if you could have these Broncos safeties in their prime, which of these duos would you rather have on your team? Man, a lot of safety talk here. They just
talk. Yeah.
the people don't want you to get away from it, Justin. Okay, the first safety duo is Justin Simmons and Brian Dawkins, or Steve Atwater and John Lynch. He goes on and says, how do you think Steve Atwater would rank among today's safeties? Looking at how defenses are structured with payment, safeties are like bass players bass players in a band. They can get more gigs, but they get paid less. Corners are like the guitarists. There's a ton of great ones out there, but only so many spots you can fill. That's all I have for today. Support DNVR Rivals and hope to see y'all next year. Okay, Justin, the question is, who's the better safety duo in their prime? Justin Simmons and Brian Dawkins, or Steve Atwater and John Lynch?
Are they in the primes in their respective eras, or are they as talented as they were in their prime, but you have them together in the modern NFL? Because like John Lynch obviously was the backbone of those Tampa 2 defenses. Atwater could come downhill like, I don't know, and nobody I've ever seen before. I also don't know if Atwater would have been quite rangy enough to handle some of the coverage responsibilities that corners do, but I don't want to be disrespectful because I just most of when I think of Atwater's coming downhill, I'd kind of have to watch him in coverage more to see how he would translate. So I guess my gut is to go Simmons and Dawkins just because I think you have a little bit more versatility while still, having the ability to really lay the wood and get in your opponent's head. When I think of the Weapon X stuff and him, dancing on the field and talking, like there are very few players that were as fun as Dawkins. But it just feels wrong because John Lynch was one of my favorite childhood guys. Atwater is one of the best players in franchise history. But I think the answer is Simmons and Dawkins.
And you make a really good point just about how those two together may be just a little more versatile. You can do just a little more with them. However, I'm taking the two Hall of Famers right now. Maybe Justin becomes a Hall of Famer and then he and Brian Dawkins are two Hall of Famers, but I'm going with Steve Atwater and John Lynch. And you may miss out on a little bit of coverage. I don't think Steve Atwater was good in coverage, but I think Justin Simmons of these guys may be the best. But why I'm going Atwater and John Lynch is, oh my goodness. I mean, to have Brian Dawkins back there, he scared the hell out of you. So did Steve Atwater and so did John Lynch. But to have two of those guys back there, oh my gosh, good luck running the ball. Good luck sending a tight end or a wide receiver over the middle. They're going to be so scared. So, man, I'm going with that duo, but you're not going wrong with either of those guys. And something I've learned in this pod, and I think it's great, is Justin is a big fan of fellow Justin Simmons.
He's great. I think he's one of the more underappreciated players in the NFL. And I think part of it is coming out of Boston College. He was a guy that I was really hyped on, specifically his tackling abilities. It was just having grown up in the Champ Bailey era, I have an affinity for defensive backs, whether it's safeties or corners, that wrap up, just complete the play. You don't, I mean, the highlight tackles are awesome. When you see somebody get, just murked in the open field like John Lynch used to do, I mean, it gives me goosebumps. I will say a lot of those hits that we used to love would probably be penalties in the modern game. So it's, you got to factor that into the equation too. But Justin Simmons, man, he makes up for so many deficiencies. And I think once Denver finally has a complete defense, and I think they're pretty close to having it, if not already having it, he's really just going to flourish. And I think we're going to see him create even more turnovers because the last couple of years, the linebackers have not been good in coverage. He's had to come down a lot and make up for them. We've been slow at linebacker. That's been frustrating. But I love a guy that can do a little bit of everything, and that's Simmons.
Yeah, and he certainly can. And I think it's a great point that he probably hasn't even reached his peak yet because he's had multiple 5 interception seasons. Justin, I think he's going to flirt with double-digit interception seasons in his prime, whether that's this year, next year, the following year. And I think that's when I think the country says, okay, this dude is an every year Pro Bowler, is an every year All Pro, and so I think that he's not viewed. He's not a household name yet around the country, and I think he will be at some point.
He should be. I mean, if you're a true football nerd and you're watching the league around, every single team, I'm sure you know who Justin Simmons is. But I agree, he doesn't have that, name brand recognition. Back in the day, he's not Brian Dawkins or Troy Polamalu, guys that just everyone revered around the league. But once we start winning, I think that's got to be a big factor in it, right? The Broncos have been largely irrelevant. So the fact that they had this really talented safety that was kind of propping up a defense and keeping it average despite having a lot of deficiencies didn't really matter because the Broncos didn't win and their offense was super boring. And I don't blame anybody that didn't want to watch this team the last couple of years. But everybody that left, they're all going to be coming back. It's just going to be worse seating because the diehards, they stuck around. You know what I mean? They kept their position. They waited. They're right here. Everyone else is in the back. But that's all right. They're still welcome in. But we know who left.
Exactly. Broncos only says RK Hank and Zach. Welcome back, Zach. Coincidentally, I was at the Louvre the same day as you. Hey, visiting Paris was just as agonizing as visiting London. Interesting. He says, moving on. I'm actually chiming in about the tunnel. That part of the journey of London and to and from Paris took 20 minutes. It was not loud. It was beneath the water, but of course the tunnel is just in total darkness. So there is no sense of being under whatsoever. I hate myself for commenting off topic again. I need to stick to what matters. Broncos only. Wow, that shocks me that a train from London to Paris is only 20 minutes. I find that hard to believe.
I am not smart enough to argue with this person, so I'm going to take their word for it. You tell me a story, I'm like, all right, cool. What else happened?
Well, you know what? We're going to hear from London Bronco right now. He says, chiming in to say that the Big Tabowski is spot on about food in London. It's like New York City in terms of quality and types of cuisines available. The only thing I'd say is that Mexican is a bit lacking here compared to the U.S. and Colorado in particular. I'm from here, but been in London for a long time. We have some decent options here, but I wouldn't put them on the same level as in Colorado. There's definitely some amazing barbecue places popping up, which is a welcome new trend. Let me know which part of town you'll be staying in, and I will give you some list of solid places to try while you're here. It's almost impossible to stay on top of all the delicious places that open up, street food or otherwise, but it's a nice problem to have. Justin, would you think of London as being a place with good or bad food? Or when you think of London's food scene, what do you think?
It's not a place that I at least have grown up viewing as like one of the, I don't know, cuisine capitals of the world or whatever, but it should be added that I'm a pretty picky eater with very little world experience. You know what I mean? I have not been fortunate to travel abroad. I don't know who I got a bribe to get included on this this Broncos London trip, but Spano, if you're watching, I'll carry the luggage. I don't care. Just let me come. I can't. It's in the college football season, but yeah, I would think that with all of the different people, like I would imagine that London's kind of a cultural melting pot, similar to New York City. You would think that alone would lead to some really good food options from a lot of different scenarios. I'm not surprised that the Mexican food isn't phenomenal. I can't say I picture pale white folks like myself, dominating that specific area of food, but that's okay as long as you've got enough options elsewhere. I personally couldn't live there if they didn't have good Mexican food, though.
Oh, so you're not picky on, or I guess you are picky on your Mexican food. You know what good Mexican food is.
spent a lot of time, in Denver and gone down to Albuquerque quite a bit. And there is just some phenomenal food in this area. I don't think it gets the credit it deserves, honestly. I mean, you hear a lot about like California, and I'm sure that there's just as good options out there. But when it comes to the national conversation, we need more respect on Denver's Mexican food scene.
Put some respect on our name. And last one coming in from Orange Blue for Life says, hey guys, sorry I haven't commented in a while, but busy summer. I'm sure there is much more information to come out, but I will also be going to the Nashville game. I live about 45 minutes away from the stadium. Are you guys going to try and set anything up along with the tailgates where we could all sit in the stadium together as well? Will be fun to bring the noise inside Nissan Stadium as well. I would say stay tuned to that. I think we're going to have a blast and so many things going on there. So can't wait to see you, Orange and Blue for Life. And Justin, I had a blast on this pod. Thank you so much for rolling with me today. Really enjoyed our conversation. Really liked that we saw things differently, and the comment section was great. Thank you all so much for rolling with us. We'll be back tomorrow on the DNVR Broncos podcast. Have a wonderful Wednesday, and we'll see you on the other side.